When I first heard that Joe Hill was bringing us another comic book miniseries, I was very excited. I loved Locke Key and absolutely adored his short-lived comic book series of The Cape. I wasn't actually sure what Wraith Welcome to Christmasland was actually about, so when I opened up the pages, I was a bit surprised at what I found. The story being told in The Wraith follows a man called Charlie Manx. He is a very interesting and intriguing character who had a very hard childhood growing up. We can see right off the bat that he is not the nicest man in the world, as he is escorting a young girl in a town car to a place called Christmasland. Throughout the car ride, we see the young girl crying and really just frightened for her life, as Manx tells the young girl to be quiet and he will give her a reward when they get to Christmasland. The tone that the book sets resembles something of a darker and scarier adaptation of The Nightmare Before Christmas. The only major difference between the film and this comic book is that Jack in The Nightmare Before Christmas is just a more likable character. What I mean by that is, right off the bat, we see that Manx is not what he appears to be. He has very dreadful intentions for what he is going to do to this little girl. The story goes back in time and we see how Manx became who he is right now, and we see the horrible and terrifying things that happened to him in his childhood to make him become what he essentially is. The story as a whole is very well written. The artwork, although it's not the prettiest in the world, it does fit the tone that Joe Hill was actually going for. The issue as a whole is a very slow burn, and it takes a few pages to really get a sense of what you're in for, and you don't really still understand if you really care what's happening. It felt kind of like reading a long novel. The issue just kind of feels like it was meant to be put to the pages, which makes sense since it is a prequel or a sequel to Joe Hill's short story. One of the major problems that I really had with this is that it never fully grabbed me the way I wanted it to. Sure, I'm not the biggest fan of gore and this kind of comic book series where it really does have a dark and sinister tone, but I just wanted it to grab me more than it ever really did, and I don't know, I guess I was sort of disappointed. I can't really go into a lot without giving away some major twists and turns, so I won't really say much else about the story as a whole. Just know that if you are into horror comics and you really enjoy extremely adult and graphic artwork, this comic book series could be for you. The writing holds up very well, but I want to say that it does a bit too much of the narration where our protagonist is telling us what's happening while it's happening, while still including some of the dialogue that the people in the flashbacks are actually doing. So it just left for a lot of jumbled up and a lot of writing on the artwork. I guess as a whole, I would recommend The Wraith. It's an interesting book and I understand what they were going for. It just particularly didn't really interest me the way I wanted it to. It kind of felt like you were rooting for the bad guy the whole entire time. Kind of like rooting for Hellraiser or Michael Myers to murder as many people as possible. The only issue I have is that in those films, you're meant there to be entertained and just kind of have fun with it. And with The Wraith, you're meant to take it really, really serious, and there's no comedy or anything really fun about this book. It's just a really dark and gritty story. Now, I'm sure for many, they will love and enjoy the character of Manx and love the way he sets himself up and the tone that he puts, and he kind of has a bit of a Freddy Krueger thing about him, except just not funny. But for me, it just didn't appeal to me, and the story as a whole was really well told. I just didn't particularly care what happened next. So I'm going to give The Wraith issue number 1 a 7.2 out of 10. For a more in-depth look at this and many more reviews, make sure you guys check out geekedoutnation.com. Written by fans, for fans.